Hey, Dave Melenda here, Positive Polarity Podcast. Hope things are going awesome for you. I got this word this week that I want to use and we want to unpack today. I'm honored to be hanging out with somebody that is going to do this for us. So the word is wellness. And as soon as you hear that word, all these different connotations come into your brain. So all I'm going to ask you to do is to just put a bookmark there before you go and think you know what it is. We're going to look at it from a little bit different perspective today. So I'm honored to be hanging out with Elisabeth Christoph. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me on.
Awesome. You are the founder of Brain-Based Wellness. So I am super curious to know, what is brain-based wellness? Fill us all in.
Yeah, so BrainBased Wellness is a virtual platform where we use applied neurology or functional neurology to train our brain and our nervous system to be more resilient, to handle more stress. So, applied neurology is really just using the latest in brain science to come up with really practical exercises that you can use to train your nervous system, especially your visual system, like your eyes, the balance system in your inner ear, your body mapping system, and your interoceptive system that tells your brain what's going on inside of your body. So we have little exercises that you do on a daily basis to train those different parts of your nervous system so that your nervous system functions better all of the time and you experience a better output, a better way of living your life because your nervous system can handle more stress without moving you into protective outputs.
Holy cow. So you're going to have to keep this really simple for me, okay?
Okay.
I'm like in sixth grade education level. So there were some words there that kind of, messed me up. So
Okay.
I love the
Let's break it
practical.
down.
Yes, I love the practical piece. And I love the fact that there's some things that we can do on a regular basis to be able to, help our bodies along. So, and it's interesting because you said it twice and I want to get clarification on this so that, because there's a lot of people that are out there trying to reduce stress. And you're saying that we need to learn ways to just deal with it in a better way, that not reduce it, but just work with what we have. Or is it a combination of trying to reduce stress? How do
It's
you?
probably a combination of both, right? Like we don't want to keep living a life that is constantly dysregulating us and causing a lot of stress, right? We want to
Sure.
find ways to reduce that. But at the same time, like the world is stressful and life is life, right? There's a pandemic and there's going to be job stress sometimes or relational stress, or there's old trauma that maybe you've never processed. And there's injury to your body and old deficits in your nervous system. So they're just stress is right. And
Yeah.
part of being alive is having some of those things. And so what we want is to understand that a little bit of stress is necessary for adaptation, for growth. We're meant to handle a little bit of stress and we actually want it to create change sometimes, but too much stress for too long, chronic stress
Okay.
is what becomes really harmful to our bodies, to our health, to our mental health, to our behavior. And so what we want to be able to do is to train our nervous system. Our nervous system is like your operating system. It's this
Okay.
really intelligent system inside of you that drives all of your autonomic processes like your heartbeat and your digestion and your respiration, but also your behavior and your experience of pain or experience of strength or range of motion in your muscles. It's the governing body that integrates everything that's going
Okay.
on inside of you from your brain to your body and really changes your experience of the world based on how it's functioning. And so what we want is for our nervous system to be able to handle more of our life stress without moving into a protective mode. So at the end of the day, it's really important to remember that our brain's primary job is our survival. And on a second by second basis, your old brain, the back part of your brain, is always deciding safe or unsafe. And then
Okay.
it's going to generate an output based on that decision. And that output can be protective. So a protective output is anything that gets you to reduce the amount of stimulus coming into the system that makes your world smaller, that keeps you safe. So it could be pain. Pain is a great behavior change tool that gets you to take smaller steps, work
Right.
out with less intensity, interact with the world less. It could be nausea. It could be depression. It could be extreme fatigue. Any of these are outputs of a brain and a nervous system that feels threatened, wants you to stay smaller, maybe go lay down, pull the covers over your head, and reduce the amount of stimulus coming in. Or it could be a performance output, something that gives you a lot of strength in your muscles, greater range of motion, less muscle tension, more ability to be present, focused, connected with the world, to have agency and control over your behaviors. And so if we can train our nervous system to function better all of the time, to handle more stress, then we experience less of those protective outputs and
Okay.
are able to move into a performance way of being more of the time, even when we're under stress.
Okay. So you said chronic stress. So if somebody's listening and they're trying, I mean, let me ask it a different way. Is it as simple as like two buckets? I'm either in the stress bucket or I'm in the chronic stress bucket. Or, I mean, for somebody, how do they know? Because again, I think the more that we deal with stress or the more stress we have, like the higher tolerance for pain we get. So how do we know what healthy stress or unhealthy stress look like?
So stress is interesting because people talk a lot about it, but like, what is stress really? And it's a very physiological thing that happens in your body. So stress is when certain hormones are produced, adrenaline and cortisol, that are really preparing your body for action. So you have two parts of your autonomic nervous system. So when I say autonomic nervous system, I just mean the part of your nervous system that controls the things that are happening automatically without you having to think about them. So your heart rate, digestion, respiration, for the most part, muscle tension, all of that
Okay.
that is going on, but you don't have to think about it.
Okay.
And that part of your nervous system has kind of two parts. There's your sympathetic, which is your arousal network, where you're moving into action. It's preparing you to fight or to flee or to take action in some way. So it's going to move the blood from your organs to your limbs. It's going to speed up your heart rate. It's going to stop your digestive process, and it's going to pump out a lot of adrenaline, and cortisol is part of that stress response. And then we have your parasympathetic part of that, which is what brings you down. You're calm and respond. And that's when you move back into rest and digest. You're able to experience pleasure, be very present, and relax. And you never want to be in either one of those states for too long. We're meant to kind of flow between the two. And
Okay.
we want the right amount of stress for the task at hand. But when we get stuck in that sympathetic way of being, that fight and flight response for long periods of time, either because our life is really stressful or because we have unresolved stress. A lot of people with trauma in their background or complex PTSD get kind of stuck in these heightened stress states. And then your body is producing all this adrenaline and especially all this cortisol all the time. And that can become very damaging to your blood vessels. It can become damaging to your nerves. It can cause digestive issues. It can cause issues with your respiration. And so you will start to notice if you're in chronic stress because you start to experience some of these symptoms of long-term stress, digestive problems, autoimmune issues, skin rashes, migraines, constant migraines, or unwanted behaviors like binge eating, like dissociation. These are all protective outputs. That is your body saying like, hey, you've been under too much stress for too long. We're going to try to do something to re-regulate you, to change that. And so you can really look at your experience of life to know, have I been under too much stress for too long? Because your body and your behavior will start to tell you if that's the case.
So if I eat so is it all the Doritos that I eat? Can I blame that on stress? Does that work that way?
Well, yeah, you can. I would argue you can. And
Yeah.
that's actually,
Yay.
maybe not
Okay, good.
everybody feels this way, but
Yeah.
binge eating is something that I've struggled with my whole life. I grew up in a kind of unstable environment. I have childhood trauma, I have complex PTSD, and without knowing it, most of my life I was moving through the world in a very hypervigilant state and in a lot of stress, overly aware of my surroundings, constantly preparing for something bad to happen. And that meant that I was stuck in that sympathetic arousal state for too long.
Okay.
And one of the ways that my body found to regulate my nervous system, to move me back into that calm and respond, rest and digest state of being, was to eat a bunch of food. And
Mm,
so if I do that, it gives some important nerves like my vagus nerve, which is a key player in that parasympathetic system. It gives my digestive organs stimulus. It gives certain areas of my brain stimulus, and it allows me to move out of that high stress state into a more relaxed state. And do I want to be like that forever? Do I want, eventually that becomes harmful and not adaptive. But in that moment, my old brain, my survival brain is just thinking, this is too much stress. We've been under too much stress for too long. This is causing problems with the immune system. This is causing problems with inflammation. Staying in this state is not safe. What can we do to move out of it? Well, if we eat a bunch of food, that will help. And
sure.
so it's one of the ways that our body learns to help us regulate. And so
Mm,
if we find new tools to give our body the regulation that it needs, then we don't have to engage in the same behavior. But until we
sure.
start to learn new tools, it becomes really difficult to move out of those patterns because it's our survival brain trying to protect us in that moment.
So that, and you bring up a great point. So what are a couple of tools? I mean, what does that look like? So, I could say that I'm, just existing through life and I'm just kind of existing. I'm not flourishing. I'm not really aware of what's going on. We do a lot of work with EQ. So my emotional quotient, my emotional intelligence might be a little low and I'm just not really aware. I'm just kind of doing it, going through the motions. What kind of tools would you, help us with, Elisabeth, to be able to, at least start along that journey to see what that does to our body and our stress?
So, the first place that I think is really important to focus on is just beginning to become aware of the signals that your body is sending you, because a lot of us are very detached from our body. Maybe it doesn't even feel safe to do that. So you want to start with little minimum effective dose of that
Okay.
and just begin to cultivate a daily practice, starting with maybe 30 seconds a day of
Okay.
dropping from your head down to your body, and just with a mindset of curiosity, seeing how many signals you can read. What can I feel? My own heart beating? Can I feel my rib cage expand and contract as I breathe in? Can I feel what's going on in my stomach? How does it feel between my eyes? How does it feel in my jaw and my throat? Can I feel the surface of my feet on the floor? Can I feel my clothes against my skin, the temperature of the room, the air? And just see how many signals you can begin to read from your body, so that you start to develop that relationship of being able to hear those signals. And that's actually training a really important system in your body called your interoceptive system, that relays information from your body up to your brain. And it lets your brain know what's going on inside of you.
Okay.
And the more we can train that system, the more stimulus it gets, the better it functions. And then also we can start to listen to our body, so that when we're starting to experience signals of threat, like maybe a little bit of pain here, or maybe my heart rate is starting to increase, or my palms are getting sweaty, or my mouth is drying out, I now have this practice of being able to feel that and recognize that. And I can think, I'm moving into threat. I'm moving into a stress state. So, can I do something now to help myself calm down rather than just pushing through that until I'm all the way to being really dysregulated, until I'm standing in front of the pantry, like shoveling food in my face, or until I'm laying in bed with the covers pulled over my head with a migraine? Can I stop and regulate myself before I get to that
Sure.
extreme state? So,
Gotcha.
starting first, just to start to listen to the signals that your body is sending you, and listen without judgment, with curiosity, and just take a moment to do that. And then
Hmm.
the second thing would be to create safety in doing that, and create safety in the body. So again, once you start to hear those signals, or even maybe before and after you try to hear those signals, if that feels unsafe, doing a couple things that your nervous system really likes, that it responds well to, so that you are teaching your brain and your body and your nervous system that it's safe to do this. So, one of the easiest things to do is just to focus on your breath. And one breathing technique that tends to be generally positive for a large number of my clients, and everybody's different, everybody's nervous system is unique, but
Sure.
a lot of people get positive benefit from this, is straw breathing. So you just breathe in through your nose, and then you purse your lips and you breathe out like you're breathing out of a straw, to
Okay.
create a little bit of resistance for your exhale. And you make your exhalation twice as long as your inhalation.
Hmm.
Long exhales help to upregulate your parasympathetic system, the calm and respond network, to move you out of that heightened state of fight and flight. So if I can start to listen to my body and feel, hey, I'm moving into stress, I'm moving into dysregulation, can I stop now and just take 6 of those straw breaths
Hmm.
to recalibrate? Then maybe I can interrupt that cycle before I get to the behavior that I don't want, before I get into a lot of pain, before I have a headache, before I experience whatever output it is that my brain is used to generating to keep me safe.
So is that why some people are always telling me to breathe? Just breathe? I mean, is obviously there's some, I don't want to say healing, but I guess that's the word that came to my mind. There almost feels like there's some healing to breathe when you breathe in a certain way. I tend to do that 4 square, where you breathe in for 4
Box
seconds,
breathing. Yeah.
hold it for 4, exhale for 4, and then hold it for another 4. That really, to me, is like before I get on to speak, or before I'm getting into a higher stress situation. That really helps for me. I mean,
Absolutely.
for the layman that's listening, i.e. me, why is that? I mean, is there a simple explanation on why breathing is so medicinal? I guess I'll use. Is there something simple in this,
I mean, there's a
or is it
lot of
really
reasons.
complicated?
We can keep it simple. So one of the things is, think about how important your breath is to your survival, right? If somebody
Sure.
was to start choking you, you would
Yep.
feel panicked really, really fast,
Right.
because oxygen is necessary for our brain to stay healthy. It's necessary for many of our bodily processes to occur. And so our brain really values our ability to breathe, to
Okay.
feel safe. And so we can send a signal from our body up to our brain that we are not under threat, simply by changing our respiration. So there's always communication going on between the body and the brain. It's not as compartmentalized as people tend to think it is. It's all a bunch of loops, a bunch of feedback loops. And so
Okay.
rather than using our cognitive mind to say, hey, I'm okay, I'm not under threat right now, but my body is telling me that I am, because my heart is racing and I'm taking shallow breaths, I'm upper chest breathing, I'm gasping, I'm breathing in a lot and not exhaling a lot. If I can change that at a physiological level and start to, from my body up to my brain, send a signal that I am okay, I'm not under threat. Because if I was under threat, I would be breathing shallow breaths, I would be exerting a lot of energy, I would need a lot of oxygen going to my muscles. But if I can take nice long slow exhales, I'm sending a signal to my old brain, my brainstem, my cerebellum, my survival brain, that everything's okay and that there's nothing to be worried about. So it's a bottom up approach to
Okay.
saying, like, hey, we're okay right now.
Hmm. And that's kind of where your I wrote down that protective mode versus performance mode. I mean, you talk about that where it's got to be hard to be in a protective mode and perform well because your focus is different. I mean, and so from an entrepreneur, business owner's perspective, we have a lot of them listening, they probably end up in performance mode quite often. But do you shift back and forth into those modes really easy? And is there anything wrong with that shift? It sounded almost like you said that was kind of normal for to shift back.
You do want to move back and forth between things, but being in a really protective mode, you cannot perform. Your old brain will always win over your frontal lobe. So that's just the way that our system is wired. We're always going to go for survival first. And it's also like the feeding pattern of the brain is bottom to top, back to front. And so my back brain is going to override my higher order thinking systems when it needs to. And there's also the fact that a lot of times as entrepreneurs and hard driving, performance oriented people, we believe in what we're doing. And maybe we've trained as athletes or we've trained as high performers. We push through things a lot. And what will happen when we do that often is that we can, in that moment, push through the signals that our body is sending us that this isn't okay. And then on the back end of getting through something, you will experience the protective outputs that kind of shut you down because of the amount of stress and energy that has taken. So like what used to happen to me is, one of my old beliefs from childhood was that it wasn't safe to be visible. I grew up in a really unstable childhood. And so if I thought like, if I just stay invisible, if I stay in the background, I won't get hurt because people are unstable. And there's these, core beliefs that we bake in. And then as I started this business, I wanted to be more visible. So I started doing podcasts and putting myself out and being the face of the business. And because I believe in my mission and my vision, I could do that. But on the back end of it, I would get really tired. I would get a migraine. I would want to binge. I would be exhausted the whole weekend after. And what I learned is that I'm pushing myself into threat. And then I can use the adrenaline to push through for a little bit, but I'm going to suffer the consequences on the back end. So what I do now is I do some high performance neuro drills. I do some high payoff drills before I do this podcast. And then I re-regulate my nervous system after I do this podcast so that I can do the things that I want to do and not have to sacrifice the quality of my life, not have to move into those unwanted behaviors.
Wow. So are you in protective mode right now?
I am not. I feel like I'm here with you and present.
Because
and
that wasn't a trick question. I just wanted to know.
No. And I've certainly done podcasts where I've completely dissociated and left my body and been like, what did I even say? Right. But before I do a podcast now, I do some stimulus for my vagus nerve. I do some breathing exercises. I do some vision drills so that I am feeling I'm feeling really calm, connected, and present by the time I get here to talk to you.
Gotcha. So I wrote down these words and I want to make sure that they are accurate because I'm thinking again about a business owner that's listening and is kind of unfamiliar with the protective mode. So for this situation, could you be protecting like your business, your customers, your money, your team? I mean, is that, I mean, I don't know if that's simulating that right, but that's kind of what I wrote down because I feel like there's a lot of entrepreneurs that are very protective of that. And so, but we look at that in a healthy way. So I don't know if I'm mixing things up in your mind here.
Yeah, I think that a lot of times it goes to kind of a deeper, more primal level. Like you might be protecting relationships because you don't want to be abandoned or rejected. You might be protecting yourself from being rejected from the herd. Like if you have maybe controversial ideas or something that's going to cause conflict, even though you want to put it out into the world at this deep primal level, we are social animals and being rejected from the herd is scary and threatening. Or perhaps you're protecting your essential need for safety and security. And that might come through money.
Gotcha.
Um,
Okay.
but it's more about deep survival through relationships, through safety, and your deep identity.
Hmm. So the relationship part, I mean, I think that that's probably whether it's at home or at work, that tends to be pretty volatile, I would think. So, I mean, do you get into ways to protect those relationships? Is that part of the work that you do? Or if I was a business owner and I was struggling with a relationship with somebody on my team, I couldn't get along with them, it wasn't working, it always felt like there was conflict. Is there any tips that you would have for that type of person?
I believe that generally, the more regulated we are at the level of our nervous system, the more, calm we are, the easier it is to move into our highest good, into our higher order thinking systems, into our frontal lobe. And so there is a good chance that that person is triggering something else for me. If there's someone that I'm always in conflict with, perhaps they remind me of something from my childhood. I need to look at my attachment style. Have I been leaky with my boundaries here? Have I not been able to keep claiming my sovereignty because I feel threatened in some way and I've overextended myself? Like, what is happening that's making me so constantly move into a threat state with this person? And then if I can, around that relationship, examine the beliefs that are pushing me into that dysfunctional way of being with the person, then I can start to see like where that relationship is out of alignment. But then in order to move into alignment with that person, I do think I have to also be regulating myself as I do that, because I'm probably in those patterns out of a survival need. There's something about my attachment style that I'm moving into with that person that is causing me to re-trigger myself all of the time. And so getting out of that pattern is going to be inherently threatening at first. And that's one of the best gifts that nervous system regulation has gotten me, is I've been able to change my attachment style to people and move out of codependent patterns so that I can really create relationships that are much more in alignment with how I want to be in the world and the kind of partnership that I want, the kind of business relationships that I want, the kind of friendships that I want, without dysregulating myself. But that's hard because those are deep wired.
Sure. So does the self-awareness equal success in your mind? The more self-aware you are, the more, and everybody gets to define what success looks like. So it doesn't mean money or status or anything. Everybody gets their own definition. But I mean, just from a high level, I tend to see that, and I think I heard that, but I wanted to confirm that the more self-aware we are, the more we tend to have success. And I didn't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I think it's really important. And for me, part of self-awareness is being able to not just be aware of my thought patterns and my cognitive mind, but also what my body is asking of me, and to come back into my body, to be able to experience and express my emotions, to be able to read the signals that my body is giving me, and to start to create a life, a business, a partnership, a life, family relationships that serve my well-being in my body, that I create a life where my nervous system feels good, where I feel safe and regulated. And to me, that is successful, because
Mhm.
I'm staying in health and I'm creating a life that's in alignment both with my body and my nervous system and my mind.
So does that end up kind of becoming the definition of wellness of what you just said?
For me, I think absolutely. I think
Okay.
stress is probably the most, chronic stress is probably the most detrimental thing to our wellness. It impacts our behavior
Sure.
in to ways that don't serve us. It also leads to disease, cancer, autoimmune, inflammation, digestive issues. Stress is at the root of 95% of most diseases. And so
Wow.
it's really important that we learn ways to regulate ourselves, and then also, like you mentioned in the beginning, to create a life where we're not so stressed, where we're not constantly having to re-regulate ourselves because we're pushing
Sure.
into that dysregulation. But that when we do face it, we have ways to deal with it, to move it through our body and to express it, and not just internalize it, keep it stuffed in all the time and make ourselves sick.
Well, and it seems like there's almost like there's two camps of people. There are certain people that like get stressed at the smallest thing. And I don't know if that is just like the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak, and they've been experiencing this stress for a long time, or if they go from 0 to 100 and one thing just puts them over the edge. But then there's the other camp that just never seem to get rattled. So I don't know if one is better than the other or healthier than the other, but I think the more we're aware of what camp we're in, the more success we would have in trying to deal with that. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think so for sure. Everybody's nervous system is different. Everybody's body is totally unique. And some people are going to be more sensitive to things than other people. And also, people have past trauma, past issues that live inside of them. And some of the people who go with everything may also be really dissociated and shut down and internalizing things in a lot of ways. So it's hard to know if that's like really healthy and resilient, or if it's just kind of like shut down.
Sure.
And I would say that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter which one you're in. The most important thing is that you find ways of moving that stress through your body, of allowing your body to process the stress, to process emotions, to not keep it stored inside, and then tools to make you feel better, to help you regulate, to help calm your system, no matter which person you are, so that you don't have to be so emotionally volatile or hypersensitive. You develop tools so that you can navigate through the world however you naturally are.
Sure. So then how does your company BrainBased Wellness fit into this? If I'm listening today and some of this is new, a lot of it is new, I never thought of it before. I mean, where do you then come alongside me? And I mean, what does that look like in a normal situation?
Yeah, so we have a membership site where folks get together, and I'm on there live pretty much every day. And we do different modalities of stress processing and nervous system training. So we have applied neurology classes where I'll train your visual system, your eyes, the balance system in your inner ear, your body mapping system. And that's just a daily practice of
Okay.
training your nervous system, just like you would train your muscles in the gym to be
Sure.
stronger, to be more resilient, just putting in like 10 minutes a day of training the nervous system so that it's
Hmm.
getting better input from all
Okay.
of the sensory systems. And when your brain gets better input, it can do its primary job of making predictions and generating an output to keep you alive better. So the higher quality input coming in from my eyes, from my inner ear, from my joints, telling my brain where my body is in space, then the safer my nervous system feels on a second by second basis. The safer my nervous system feels, the less protective outputs I'm going to experience.
Hmm.
And so we do that all the time in community. We work together to train, because it's great to have all of these tools, but if you don't do them, then there's no point. So that's why I created the membership site, so that we could come together and do it, um, and that people would actually do it and see results. And then I also have a program called Food Freedom, which is for people with disordered eating, and
Hmm.
another one called Energy Creation for entrepreneurs that are maybe a little burnt out.
Hmm.
And we develop the tools using applied neurology and also somatic practices, which is just moving emotions and stress through the body. And then we also do like neurosomatic meditation and subconscious rewiring to create really big behavior change. And those are 6-month small group programs.
Gotcha. Awesome. So you mentioned burnt out, and as we start to come in for a landing today, I want to kind of talk to you about that, because if I'm again listening and these are some newer ideas for me, how do you determine this burnt out piece? Is there an assessment that I can take? Is there questions that you ask me and then you determine that? Because I think burnt out is the beginning and middle stages of that tend to be blind spots for people. But, when you get into that, oh my gosh, I'm working 15 hours a day and I still don't have enough time. And, family's no fun anymore. You start to have some really visible outward signs. I think we're all probably in that fight or flight. We get that part of it. But I think there's a lot of people in it that really don't know that they're in it. It's kind of like frog, and you turn up the water, a degree at a time, and the frog stays in the water. So I was just curious how you assess that for people, for somebody listening that might be like, I don't know if I'm burnt out. How would I learn more about that?
For me, usually people come to me when they're pretty far along in the burnout process.
So if you're listening, okay, don't be in that pretty far along group. Okay. Yeah. That's why we're here this week. So
we hope we can get you before that. But a lot of times people come to me because of the symptoms that they're experiencing, which is usually chronic pain, migraine, extreme fatigue, or depression and anxiety. And so by the time they're there, they have really pushed themselves into a state that's not great. And that's why they show up and are ready to do the work. But I would say burnout generally comes from, our deep beliefs that are pushing us into leaky boundaries and codependency, where we are giving more than we really have bandwidth for, and maybe attaching too much of our safety, our worth, our identity to our business, to other relationships, and unable to stand in our sovereignty. We're driven into perfectionism, perhaps by trauma. We're driven into overdoing, underbeing, just that constant hustle culture. And so if you're somebody who has a really difficult time resting, if you have insomnia, if you have a difficult time, putting boundaries around your workday, if it feels like life threatening to say no to people, to take time out, if you go on vacation and it doesn't feel even though you're somewhere else, but your mind is still racing with the to-do list and the things, and it feels scary not to have your email with you to check it, then these are all signs of a pattern of being, a belief system, a physiological state that your body is used to being in, that is leading you down the path to a crash.
So this was really fun until you said leaky boundaries. Now this isn't any fun anymore. Okay. Because you're kind of talking to me personally about that. And so I don't know if someone told you to say that, but I struggle with boundaries on a pretty consistent basis. I have in the past. I want to work on that moving forward. Because part of it is because I love to serve and help people. Part of it too is probably the low self-esteem that you said, where, somebody's better than me. Who are you to say no? There's all these kind of things that start to combat in my brain. So I'm just curious, where would you send the people listening that they have the leaky boundary syndrome?
I would say,
where would we hang out? What would be a good
energy
place?
Creation would be the place for that. My energy creation group and or private training. And I certainly relate. I've been an entrepreneur my whole life, and workaholism is a very real thing that I have been deep in many phases of my life, and suffered from chronic pain and migraines and all the things that come along with that. And I have many clients that it takes really first creating safety in the body, creating safety and tools for regulation in the body, and then being able to go back and look at those core wounds, the things that we developed in early infancy and early childhood between the ages of 0 to 7 that we thought were necessary for survival, that we developed inside of our mind to ensure that we got our needs met, that we got the attention that we needed, that we got the nourishment that we needed. And sometimes it looks like things like my desires are too much. I'm too much. Maybe it's I'm bad. Maybe it's that I'm not enough. And so life becomes this constant struggle to make sure that we don't go against that deep core belief
Sure.
so that we
Yep.
are ensuring our survival. And so, how do we find that, pull it out, deconstruct it, and then learn to embody new beliefs at the level of our body and our nervous system so that we're not constantly pushing ourselves into threat by trying to go against those old beliefs that our subconscious mind has been using our entire life to keep us safe. So we want to make sure we don't make it threatening for our nervous system to act differently.
Part of me would rather just stay fat, dumb, and happy, right?
Yeah.
Where, you don't want to know that stuff. You just kind of, it's okay cruising along, not paying that attention. But I think
Yeah.
when you really sit with yourself for a little bit, and I think that, to me, I always encourage people to sit with yourself for a little bit and try and, take off all the roles that you have and just look at your image of you. And if you don't think of yourself as a 10 on a scale of 1 to 10, your image, even though you could be a bad driver, bad dad, bad mom, bad brother, you could be, one of your roles isn't a 10. For some odd reason, those two seem to like combat each other. If I'm a bad father or a bad husband, therefore I'm a bad person. So that's where I think this is so helpful to be able to, like you said, is separate yourself from that. Because if you keep thinking you're a bad person, you then keep working harder to get better. And then I think that's where that burnout comes. And then I gotta believe, like you said, by the time people come to see you, Elisabeth, it's like, this is chronic, this is serious, this is like life and death at that point for a lot of these people. So I really appreciate you trying to, move the needle so that we are cognizant of this earlier, in our lives. So, thanks for sharing that. I wish I could cross out leaky boundaries. I wish I could put a check mark next to it that they're fixed. So, but I will definitely work on that. And thank you so much for sharing that. So, what would a couple more questions and then I'm gonna let you go. What would Elisabeth Christoph's tip of the week be for everyone listening?
My tip of the week would be that our bodies have a very high intelligence and that there's so much expansion, growth, opportunity for healing if we can just come back into our bodies, even if it's just for a little bit of time every day, and start to ask our body what it needs. How does it want us to be with it? And cultivate that relationship with the body and see where it leads you, because there's really a lot there.
Wow. I'm 57 years old and I've never heard that prior to this. I never would ask my body what it needs. It always seems that I should tell it what it needs.
Yeah, that's the way of the world, right?
Yeah. So what a great perspective. So thank you so much for sharing that. So the last question is always fun, so for the people that don't know you, what's one thing that you feel comfortable sharing that most people don't know about you?
One thing that most people don't know about me. I'm such an open book. It's really hard to think of things that people don't know about me. I think my morning routine is odd to a lot of people. Some people might know it, but I spend a lot of time in the morning regulating my nervous system for the day, and it looks pretty crazy. I'll wear these colored red glasses. I'll like vibrate my tongue with a little vibrating object I have called a Z-Vibe while I'm jumping on a trampoline, and maybe have a scarf wrapped around my waist, and I'm doing some strange movement with my arm. And so like, if sometimes as I'm doing that, I think like, what if people could look in the walls of my house and see me right now? They would think I'm crazy. Sometimes I'm like making noises and gargling water while like looking at something with just my left eye. And it's a very strange practice. If you are one of my clients, you're used to doing that. But for the rest of the world, I think they would be pretty surprised to see it.
Well, we would love a picture for the show notes.
Okay, I'll get you one. I'll get you one for sure.
Oh my gosh, thank you for sharing that. So again, we just scratched the surface and there's so much more here. So if you're listening, it's hard. Let's be real here. It's hard to admit, that you have a shortcoming, or it's hard to admit. Like for me, it used to be hard. It's a lot easier now. The more that I admit that I struggle with boundaries, or I have struggled with them in the past, and I want to do something about it now. We talked about a lot of different things. And so, my encouragement and Elisabeth's encouragement are do something with what you got. I mean, it's super easy to, go on to the next podcast. It's super easy to go back into your day. If you're working out, or you're walking, or you're sitting, driving, whatever you're doing, I just want to encourage you to come up with one thing that you're going to do based on this, whether it's a breathing exercise, whether it's, trying to become more self-aware, maybe it's becoming more aware of your body signals, whatever you really took away from today. I just want to encourage you to do that. And if you need something more, that's why Elisabeth is here, to be able to help. Maybe it's join the energy creation group. Maybe you just want to learn more about it. Whatever that is, I just want to encourage you to, take that next step, because otherwise the last 45 minutes is great information. It's just, if we don't do anything with that information, it's not osmosis where it automatically kicks in. So
That's so
I just
true.
want to encourage you to do that. And Elisabeth, if people want to learn more about you, they want to get in contact with you, something here really struck a nerve for them, what's the best way for people to connect with you?
The best way is through my website, which is brainbased-wellness.com. And I actually have a free video series there that will take people through 5 really high payoff neuro drill exercises and teach them just a little bit more about how to assess and reassess, how to learn what's good for their nervous system. And it's totally free. And just like you were talking about, it's a really actionable, easy way to get started. And you can find that through my website at brainbased-wellness.com.
Awesome. Brainbased-wellness.com.
You got
Perfect.
it.
That's so cool. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with us today. This is so cool. I always love learning new stuff. I have a completely different idea what wellness was when I started, and now I have a different understanding of this. And for wellness and leaky boundaries to be in the same sentence is like super weird for me, but it totally makes sense. So thank you so much for everything. And again, if you're listening, yeah, absolutely. If you're listening, I just really encourage you to, take the next step and do something. It doesn't cost anything to go to the website and look at those videos. That's where I'm headed, because I'm super curious. I saw them in preparation for today, but I didn't invest the time. Now I'm going to definitely invest the time. And if you talk to me more about, if I get in more deeper trouble here, I'm going to have to call you and say, quit talking about me on your videos. So, but I greatly appreciate the vulnerability that you have. And it really helps when, somebody's vulnerable. It makes it easier for the rest of us. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for the time. And
thank you.
Look forward to the videos. And the next step after the videos would be probably then to reach out to you. Is that, or join a group? You
can reach out to me for a consult. You can do membership on the site, anything that speaks to you.
Excellent. Super. Well, thank you again. And
thank you so much.
Look forward to the videos. And maybe next time we talk, my boundaries will be a little bit less leaky. So
awesome. That's amazing.
Thank you. See ya.